I want to share with you some stories that I have heard in my line of work, my experiences, and some of my co-workers. They aren't paranormal or anything like that, but they are strange enough to fit in here. So an acquaintance of mine introduced me to a part-time job that related to the courts. The job was to go in and clean houses and apartments which had been either repossessed or the tenants had been evicted from. I'll give you a quick rundown of how this works. An enforcement officer will approach the court with a warrant to repossess or evict. Once granted, they will expel the tenant. In most instances, the properties have already been abandoned, and the tenant is nowhere to be found. On the off chance that there is someone there, the enforcement officer will knock or ring the bell. Then if there's no answer, a locksmith will gain access. A court bailiff is present too. At the bailiff's command, we are then sent in to clean and empty the property. We get everything we can out of there, from furniture to garbage. It's not all that different from the scenes you see on TV. In most cases, eviction is prompted by the lack of rent payments by the tenant, but in some other instances, tenants can be evicted due to complaints from neighbors. This is more common in apartment blocks. You won't believe some of the things I've seen and heard in this job. It's shocking. I just want to give you 4 examples. Number 1, Pigeon Man. Once the bailiff had got the door open, we entered, and at that moment several pigeons came flying straight at us. It really startled me, but it wasn't a patch on what I saw next. In that apartment there must have been about 50 pigeons. The floor was completely white with their droppings. It didn't smell half as bad as some other places I've been in though. The droppings were about 10 centimeters above the floor level. They were almost fossilized, and they looked like stalagmites. It was hard to open the door in the property due to all the excrement caked on the floor. We had to take a sliding door off its runners just to gain access to the living room. When we finally got in there, we were all shocked by what we saw. In the center of the room, there was a mosquito net. Beneath the net, there was a single mattress on the floor. Next to the mattress was a household bucket, which appeared to be used as a toilet. It seemed like the person who lived there lived within the confines of that mosquito net. The apartment outside of the net seemed to belong to the pigeons. I had a lot of time to question how someone could live like that as I was scooping up the pigeon waste. I didn't see the tenant, and I'm kinda glad I didn't. Number 2, organized crime. There are all sorts of people in apartment blocks. Seemingly everyday people live different lives behind closed doors. Low-level gangsters and Yakuza members are often evicted due to their status. They are often given prohibited items to hold for higher-ranking members. Because their organizations don't really make a habit of putting their low-ranked members in comfortable places to live, they often apply for the cheapest public housing possible. And when they get kicked out for causing trouble or arrested for their crimes, we come in. When we come in, we always find something. I'm not surprised anymore by the sight of knives and swords. I found a few guns, homemade ones too. Oh, and that thing about the little finger, where new members cut the tip off of their little finger. Yeah, I found evidence of that. It wasn't in a low-level member's place though, it was a high-end apartment. I opened the fridge in one apartment and found a finger submerged in some kind of liquid in a jar. It looked like it was in alcohol, and there was a date on it too. I found 5 jars with fingers in that fridge. The police were brought in and we were sent home. I wonder if this Yakuza member had a hobby of collecting the fingertips of low-level members who made mistakes in their organization. I wondered if that guy was still out in the public. Maybe I've walked past him on the street. Maybe he's in prison. Or maybe he's not walking the earth anymore. Number 3, religious people. More than half of the people who get evicted are those related to religious groups. When cleaning the apartments and houses of these people, we often come across books and pamphlets. These religious groups seem new and frightening. I wonder about the people who join these cults. I guess cults would be a more appropriate word. I wonder if they joined because they had no money and they were promised financial gain and happiness by the leaders, or is the reason they have no money because they joined? I cannot ignore that it isn't a coincidence that lots of these religious followers often end up evicted and penniless. The cults either ruin them, or their debt was so insurmountable that they turned to religion to get them out of their troubles. Number 4. In this line of work, there's no bigger shock to the system than coming across a body. Yes, I'm talking about someone who seemingly had no other options left and decided to end things themselves. I've seen 5, and as soon as one is discovered, we immediately call off the job. It's our job to go back into these homes after bodies have been cleared, and there is an atmosphere. You cannot pretend that there isn't. If they told me that it would happen so regularly, I wouldn't have accepted the job. I think lots of people wouldn't have. You never know what's behind each door when you take a job. I've seen reddish brown stains that could only be described as blood all over a hardwood floor. I've seen the contours of a human face in those stains. I have never felt closer to death. We had to work with that face in the wood in the room with us. The floor was stripped after we were finished though. In this line of work we often have repeat visits. You might even say that we have repeat business. I have visited the same housing complexes several times. One of the most painful things about this work is going back to the same place. A year after I found a body in an apartment, I was called back to the very same apartment. Another tragic case. Another person chose to end it all. We were all silent that day. I believe that coincidences occur, but that was very, very unpleasant. That felt like something more than a coincidence. A few months after the second death, I heard the apartment was on the market again, and there was rumors of it being haunted. I quit the job a few months after. But I often think about it. Sometimes I pray that there isn't a third or fourth victim. That kind of job makes you wonder how well you know the people you live close to. Neighbors in the same building as you. A lot of stuff goes on behind closed doors that we have no clue about. This happened when I got into university. It was a uni in Tokyo. Rent was gonna kill me, but thankfully a relative stepped in at the 11th hour. He owned an apartment there. I was told that I could move in at any time and rent would be free. I was over the moon. I think I started living there in early March. It wasn't a perfect deal though. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was grateful, but it wasn't exactly what I had in mind. The apartment was in a very old building, and the rent was very cheap, and most of the residents weren't from Japan. It wasn't designed for students, is what I'm saying. So there I was, surrounded by various smells and language barriers. I felt like I didn't belong, you know? But my uncle assured me that it would be fine, and above all, rent was free. I mean, who am I to complain? And by the way, I didn't hate being around non-native people. I mean, it's just something I have to point out for this experience. I decided to make a go of it there. In April, classes started. I made many friends, joined many clubs, and discovered drinking. It was a riot. Every day felt like a rush. It was fun. One night I came back to my apartment after the 3rd day of a 7-day binge. I was knackered, honestly, man. I kind of threw my hand up at the door to unlock it and leant on the door to gain entrance. I was really tired. I felt a sudden strange feeling of being out of place. As I pushed the door open, it revealed a surprising sight. There was a woman sat at the table. She had long dark hair. She looked to be Filipino. "Oh, I'm really sorry, I must have got the wrong apartment," I blurted out as I closed the door. That was really weird and embarrassing as hell. Even though I was pretty drunk, something didn't seem right. I guess mistaking the apartment is easily done, but why the hell did my key work in someone else's door? That's pretty disturbing. I looked at the door number, looked at the photos I had taken on my phone of my address, and it matched up. Something was very wrong here. I felt as if I had suddenly sobered up. Was there someone in my apartment? I put the key in the lock and I slowly turned it. I fearfully pushed the door open, and through squinted eyes I saw the inside of my apartment. There was no one sat at the table when I opened the door now. Was I so drunk that I was seeing things? I guessed I was a little overtired. I was convinced the booze and lack of sleep was to blame. I fell asleep pretty easily that night. A few months went by and I had almost forgotten about what had happened that night, because nothing else happened. Until something weird happened. I want to tell you about it, but first I'll have to tell you about the apartment. It's kind of hard to explain, but the layout of my apartment went like this. When you walk through the door, you will see a door to the bathroom on the right and the kitchenette further along on the left. When you get down the hall, you will see a table in the main room. The walls are a standard grey colour and the windows have railings. I lived on the second floor, and the window in the lounge area looked out onto the street below. That window is the window I want to tell you about. When the nights and days were brighter and summer had come to Tokyo, I started to hear a strange series of noises coming from the window at night. Those noises would always creep me the hell out when I was home alone at night. It would start up at around 1 or 2 a.m., and it was a dull, thudding kind of sound. It sounded like someone was banging on the walls. It didn't really follow a pattern, you know? It wasn't as if it was a certain day of the week or an exact time, but one thing it was regular. At first I thought that it could be someone or something hitting the window from outside. I checked it and it didn't look like someone could reach the window easily, and nothing was out there that could be blown by the wind to clatter into it. It was summer anyway, 40 degrees outside with crazy humidity. There was no breeze. I wondered what the hell the person next door was doing then. I couldn't think what else it could be. I felt bad to ask questions to people who can't understand what I'm asking completely. The sound wouldn't usually last longer than 5 minutes each time, so I decided that I could just live with it. One night, one of the lights in my room went out. Even when I changed the light bulb, the light wouldn't work. I wondered if there was an issue with the wiring. I headed into town the next day to ask about how I could get it repaired. I mean, I was living there for nothing. I might as well try to help a little with household repairs. I found a local handyman and I went into his store. I told him the issue and he smiled. It was really nice. But when I told him my address, the smile on his face disappeared. Do you really live in that apartment? I felt a little weirded out. Was something going on here? I asked him what he meant. According to the local repairman, a former resident took her life in that apartment. She was a migrant worker from the Philippines. Apparently the method was hanging, and she did it by the window. That was also how the body was discovered, by a passerby. Imagine that. My blood ran cold. Things started to make sense now. The woman I had seen that drunken night wasn't down to me going into someone else's apartment. I had potentially seen an apparition. The noises I was hearing at night as well, the dull thuds which lasted no longer than 5 minutes. Could those thuds be caused by her feet skittering against the window as she hung by her neck? The desperate kicks still resonating in that apartment at night, signaling her spirit was likely not at peace. I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. I walked home in the scorching summer heat with my forehead covered in a cold sweat and chills throughout my body. I looked for another place, and until I got it sorted, I stayed with a friend. This happened 15 years ago. One night, when I was waiting at home for some of my friends to come and collect me, so we could go stay by the seaside. I'm a female, by the way. We were set to leave at night, and I was in the bathroom taking a shower. After the shower, I was drying my hair with a hairdryer. I was stood in the bathroom, and the bathroom had a small window about head height, just off to the side of the sink. I was hot, since it was summer, so I opened the window a little. I was casually glancing out of the window looking at the roof of the building next door, and that was when I noticed something shiny. What the hell is that? I wondered. I stopped drying my hair to take a closer look. There was a bright, small object, kind of hovering in the night sky. Oh, it's a UFO, I thought, with a strange kind of rush of excitement. My excitement of seeing the unknown outweighed my fear of it. My logical brain snapped back into gear, and I decided to hit the lights in the bathroom. I didn't want the unidentified flying object to see me. I felt very strongly about that for some reason. I turned my hairdryer back on and kept watching the object with interest. I finished drying my hair, and the UFO out there was still hovering. I thought that it would be a kind of cool thing to talk about with my family. I was kind of hoping one of them would know exactly what that thing was and we could all have a laugh about it. I pulled out my Polaroid camera and I got ready to snap a picture. My camera was only one of those instant print cameras, so I knew that the quality wasn't going to be great. It did have a flash though, so I thought that I might get something. I aimed my camera out of the window at the flying object and I took a photo. The small flash on my camera lit up the night sky in a quick flash of light. As soon as my camera flash went off, the object kind of reacted. It appeared to grow larger and larger. Since it looked like it could have been coming closer, I started to freak out a little. It seemed as if it spotted me. I silently closed the window and headed out of the bathroom and into the room with my family. Luckily everyone was still awake and they were sitting around in the lounge. I told my mum and sister about what had happened, and I showed them the photo I took, and to my surprise it was blank. I couldn't make out anything. It just looked like a photo of the night sky. I couldn't believe it. I was supposed to be getting ready for a fun trip with my friends, but now I was feeling pretty disturbed about what I had just witnessed. I decided to do my makeup in the lounge, in the company of my family. We spoke about all kinds of things, and I became less and less worried about the UFO. My friends arrived and I left for the sea without incident. When I came back from my trip, I knew instantly that there was something wrong at home. There was a vibe in the house, you know, an awkward and stilted kind of atmosphere. I went to my mother to ask about what had happened in my absence. And something big had happened. A home invasion. An unknown individual, or set of individuals, broke into my sister's bedroom at night. The police had come out and questioned my sister. It had really shaken her up, and she was described as being completely petrified by my mother. I wanted to ask my sister about it and show her some comfort, but when I went to speak with her, she seemed super pissed off at me. Here's what happened in short. She fell asleep, as normal that night, as I left for my trip, but she woke up a little later, suffering with sleep paralysis. She noticed that there was someone in the room with her. Then she noticed that there was more than one person in the room with her. She didn't even know how many there were. They appeared to be coming out of the shadows. She tried to get up, but found that she couldn't move a muscle. Those shadowy figures stood over her, and they were touching her and prodding her body. She said she didn't know what they were doing, but it felt wrong. She felt feelings and sensations of pain and fear that she had great difficulty in attempting to describe. She said that she was a prisoner in her own body while these human-like things did things to her. She thought that the whole terrifying ordeal lasted around an hour, and then she was suddenly able to move again. When she looked down at her body, she noticed that she was covered in countless bruises and scratches. She looked around the room as soon as she was able to move and saw no one was there. Naturally, my sister was horrified, so she screamed the house down, and my mum came rushing in to see her. It was my mother who called the police. The house was locked tight that night. The police found no evidence of a break-in too. My sister said that the only thing she could tie to the experience was my experience in the bathroom, seeing that hovering object. So she was mad at me. She thought that my taking a photo of what I saw out there had brought this on. If a police officer from Kobe who was working about 15 years ago ends up reading this, then you might remember the case, but I think the chances of that happening are pretty slim. If I hadn't gone on that trip, maybe it would have been me who had the visit. If I hadn't taken that photo, nothing might have happened too. I feel really sorry and bad about what happened to my sister. It didn't end there, though, unfortunately. Well, don't get me wrong, my sister is alive and very well. However, in my case, I felt as if I had been followed by something for about 2 years. About 2 months after the incident, I was riding my bike around the city and I noticed one evening that there was something hovering in the sky up ahead of me. I stopped my bike and I instantly thought, oh God, it's that UFO thing. I was honestly terrified. I instantly thought of what my poor sister had to go through. But this time the flying object looked as if it was black and not shining. It looked a similar shape, but it was matte black in color. I was on a kind of hill, and I could see it quite clearly. Judging by some of the buildings close to it, I assumed it was about 1 kilometer away. It's really hard to explain these things in words. It was 100% really there, but it looked like it could have been CGI or a still from a film. It was like it was too much for the naked eye to comprehend, like watching a film in 3D without the glasses. I ran into a nearby fast food restaurant. I wanted to be around people. I didn't leave the fast food restaurant for about an hour, and when I left, the UFO was gone. Similar incidents happened like that for about 2 years. There was one which lasted almost a day. It was like I was being monitored, surveilled, you know? There is no real reason for any of this happening, and I guess I sound completely mad, but I can say that it was 100% true. These things did happen to me, and I know that they happened to my sister. I saw the marks on her body. My words cannot convey the fear I have of whatever that thing was that harassed my sister. This happened about 2 years ago. I used the train to get to work, and on my route to the train station, I go through a few streets in my neighborhood. On one of the rundown buildings, on one of the rundown streets I go through, there's occasional graffiti on the walls. It was interesting because it was usually kind of a mosaic block pattern kind of graffiti, instead of a tag or a drawing of a body part. My guess is that the graffiti artist, if you can call it art, was using some kind of stencil to achieve the desired results. I had seen other stencil designs in the news before. Tommy Lee Jones from the Boss Coffee adverts, and also Shinzo Abe. So one evening, as I was heading home from work through the streets of my town, I noticed something new on that wall of the building. From a distance, it just looked like a black stain on the wall, but when I got closer, it looked almost recognizable. It looked to me like a QR code. I wondered if my phone would read it if I tried it. I stopped, pulled my phone out of my pocket, and aimed it at the graffiti. The QR code worked. A URL appeared on the screen of my phone. I tapped it, and a low-resolution video began to play. The video wasn't that interesting. It was just a still shot at night of the alley, like someone had filmed the spot where the QR graffiti was. It was boring. I think it lasted for about 30 seconds, and I watched it to the end, and nothing of note happened. The URL was a standard kind of one, you know, some kind of free website service kind of thing. I think the hosting website was called Tripod or something like that. It wasn't of any interest to me. It didn't lead me anywhere, so I thought that I'd just leave it alone. About a week later, I did get a little spooked when I noticed that the same stencil graffiti was on a telephone pole right by my house. It was weird. I was interested in scanning it though. I thought to myself, hey, why not? I was again sent to the same video hosting website. This time the image on screen was bright, and the video had been taken in the daytime. For the first time, there was someone in the video. The video had several cuts in it. Every time there was a person holding their phone to the QR code, it would cut to another scene of another person approaching the wall with their phone in hand, and arm outstretched, aimed at it. It looked like a collection of clips of people trying to read the QR code. I was all like, oh, maybe it's some advertising campaign or something, but then it dawned on me. Something didn't look right. The camera work was too shaky, not to mention any name of any product. It looked like someone was very deliberately filming whoever approached that wall. I watched with mild amusement and curiosity until I got a bit of a shock. I was among the people captured on that video. I got a chill. I didn't know I was being watched. Whoever filmed me was undoubtedly the person who created the QR code. How could I have missed him? He must have been stood so close to me. It was a really weird experience. I didn't like the idea of someone filming me secretly. What was worse was the fact that I didn't know the purpose of the video. Was it to intimidate me? If it was, then it worked. I double, if not triple checked the door was locked for a while after I saw that video. Fortunately, nothing bad has happened to me though. I wonder if the link had the ability to find out personal details. I don't know, maybe I wasn't what the person who made the QR code was looking for. So if a QR code randomly appears on a wall in your neighborhood, scan the area. Make sure no one's watching you. When I was in junior high school, there was this abandoned house that my friends and I had heard about. Everyone we spoke to at school had heard all kinds of urban legends about the place, but the truth is, I don't think anyone our age had ever been in there. Anyways, a bunch of friends and I wanted to be the first to go in, so we hatched a plan to get into the abandoned house so we could tell everyone, maybe boast to everyone that we would be the first in there. We guessed that no one had been in there for a while because the garden was overgrown, and the trees they had had in the garden were covering the windows and growing into the roof. It looked really dark even during the day. We needed flashlights, and we brought them. We got in through the back door. The house was mostly destroyed back there, and we could just walk through where the back door or back porch would have been. We were all really excited to start exploring. I was scared, but ready to do it. I couldn't wait to tell the kids at school about what we saw in there, whatever that might be. My mind was already racing. We navigated our way through the ground floor, and we didn't find much of interest down there. Next, we headed upstairs and into some kind of bedroom. There were things like diaries and dirty dust-covered dolls in that room. One of my friends picked up the diary. It looked to be about the newest item in there, so he started flipping through the pages. All that was in there were just lines and lines of names, times, dates, and some kind of random number at the end. It didn't make much sense. It was quite creepy the way there were so many inanimate eyes on us. There were sun-damaged posters of idol singers glaring at us, as well as those dust-covered dolls. Despite it being creepy, it was kind of cool to see a window into the past. We decided to head back downstairs. We realized that we couldn't really get into the kitchen because the floor was so bad in there. It didn't look safe at all. We turned our attention to the lounge. We found a huge cupboard with a sliding door. It's called a fusama here. It's just a sliding screen door which leads to storage shelves. We joked that there was something in there, No one wanted to be brave enough to throw it open at first. We had all seen The Grudge at that age and The Ring. Our imagination was conjuring up frightening images. Finally, one of my friends decided to show off how brave he was, and said that he would open the sliding door. We all encouraged him to do it, maybe even peer pressured him. He grabbed the handle with both hands and pulled it as hard as he could. What came spilling out from beyond the sliding door was a sight that we would never forget. As soon as he pulled on the door, we heard something shift from the inside. We all aimed our flashlights at the opening he had created as an innumerable amount of used syringes spilled out and covered the tattered carpet at our feet. We all started screaming and panicking. We didn't really understand the situation. We were too young to grasp it, but we knew it was bad. It wasn't like the movies, when you went into an abandoned building and saw a ghost or a monster or something. It was much worse. It was much more close to home. There were no ghosts, only the ting of metal needles skittering onto the floor. We saw something that day which for me was far more frightening and depressing than any ghost story or urban legend, the horror of abuse and addiction. A horror so intangible for our young minds, it was overwhelming. I have just one extra thing to tell you about this experience. Apparently one of my friends was still feeling brave, or he felt the need to show off his discovery to some other friends. He went back to the house where the needles littered the floor. He said that when he went back the second time with his brother and his brother's friends, it was only then that he understood the meaning of the diary we had found upstairs. As I mentioned before, the diary referenced dates, times, names, and a number we didn't understand that followed on at the end. His brother said that the number after the date and time and name was the number of injections or needles that individual had used. It truly was a house of horrors. This happened when I was at college. Not to boast or anything like that, but I consider myself attractive, and I often got hit on at college. I ended up meeting a guy we will call S, and I fell for him pretty quickly. He just seemed so cool. I was into him from the moment I met him. We started dating and things were going really well. But after a while I realized that he was a bit of an enigma. There was something a little off or perhaps strange about S. He told me he was a university student, but when I asked about what he was studying, he said that his course wasn't listed. He even went as far to say that he wasn't part of any department. I thought it was weird, but I suspected that he was just making it up because he was embarrassed about what he was doing. Or maybe he wasn't even a student of the same college, and he didn't want me to find out what college he went to because of some reason. Maybe he was embarrassed it wasn't as prestigious as some others, I don't know. Then I realized something else. There were inconsistencies in his personal life. He would mention one week that he had 2 brothers, and then the next week I would find out he had a sister, and one week he only had 1 brother. It was so shifty, it almost put me off him. But I was just so attracted to the way he looked and carried himself that I didn't allow myself to be put off. I was blinded by love, and I think we've all been there one time or another. I just wish I cared a little more though. I wish I listened to my suspicions. I wish I saw what was to come. I was completely overjoyed when he invited me to go abroad. We were still in the infancy of our relationship. I think that we must have been dating for no longer than a month or 5 weeks. I hadn't really ever gone abroad before. We usually just had our trips in Japan, although going to Okinawa felt like I was going abroad, I guess, but anyway, it was a very welcome surprise. And of course I wanted to jump at the chance to go away with my new boyfriend, but the only issue was money. I didn't have enough. I was shocked when he said he was paying for it all. I had nothing holding me back now, and I really wanted to go, so I said yes. I planned on paying him back with a surprise when I had saved enough money up. Hi, sorry to cut in, it's Jay here. The author of this story has intentionally decided to leave out the name of the destination she and her boyfriend traveled to, perhaps in an attempt to prevent any stereotyping or prejudice or anything like that. Thought it was important to note that. Now back to the story. I was really enjoying our holiday together, but I made a horrible mistake. I managed to get myself lost and separated from S. I couldn't speak English or the language there, and I didn't have any money on me. I was in a lot of trouble. I searched and searched for my boyfriend, and eventually, I found him. He was on a bus. I called out to him multiple times, and he knew I was calling out to him, but he didn't react. It was only when the bus began to pull away that he reacted. He looked at me, and he faintly smiled, and then he turned away. I was so confused. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to explain the situation or even ask for directions. He was in charge of everything. I didn't even know the exact place I was in. So I took to sleeping on a bench and eating what little food I found in garbage cans for a while. It was a totally miserable existence. After a week, I don't know, maybe 10 days, I got a visit from a representative of the Japanese embassy, and arrangements were made for me to fly home. I cannot thank that person enough. I'm not sure how they found me, but I was so grateful. When I got back, I searched for my boyfriend S, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I wanted to find out what the hell happened. The hardships I learned during my brief experience of being homeless led me to become more active in the community and attempt to raise funds to support the homeless in my area. At points, I began to wonder if S was trying to teach me about the harshness of society. I have no idea why he did what he did, so I was just trying to put two and two together, you know? About 10 years go by, and I walk past a park. I saw someone I recognized. It was S. He looked as if he hadn't changed at all. His good looks hadn't faded, and he looked as if he hadn't aged a day since I last met him. He was with a girl who looked a little younger than him. She was a beauty. Who was this guy? Is a question I wish I asked when I had the chance, but I couldn't. I just wanted to get away from him. It may be unrelated, but what about Japanese nationals who go missing abroad? Could I have just as easily become one of those missing people? I think that me getting lost that day on the route back to the hotel at the start of our holiday somehow might have saved me. Maybe even me shouting his name when he was on the bus was enough for him to change his plan. I wonder what he has in store for that cute girl I saw him with. I cannot do anything about it, unfortunately. The police aren't that interested, and I don't even have his real name, or address or anything. It's all so weird, and up in the air. Two words that constantly come to the forefront of my mind when I think back to the way he was so secretive, evasive, and impulsive. The way he wanted to take me to a foreign country so quickly in our relationship at no cost to myself. Those words are human trafficking. This happened pretty recently, and because of it, I'll be quitting my job at the end of this month. My current job is to deliver papers to homes in the mountains, basically in the middle of nowhere. It's tough because I start work at midnight in order to get all of my deliveries done. And it doesn't exactly pay well, but it's good to be working, especially when you're young. You have your own money and it's nice, right? Anyway, like I said, I start at midnight and I don't finish until the sun comes up, and sometimes in the darker months, the sun doesn't come up at all. Being out in the mountains alone at night can be pretty spooky, as I'm sure you can imagine. I want to share my recent scary experience with you. It happened this winter. I had gotten used to the rhythm of deliveries by that point, It was around winter time that the newspaper company I worked for was trying to expand their business. This meant that there would be more work for me. I was excited to earn a bit more money, but over time, it became more and more time-consuming. Basically, a subscription would come in, and then it would be down to me to deliver it to the customer. So, I'm usually riding my bike around with a map because signal is a no-go in the mountains. And I don't mean a push bike, by the way. I mean a really low-quality motorbike. Low CCs. The people who buy these subscriptions have the amazing ability to be unfindable. It never felt as if it was straightforward. I had one of those subscription jobs on that winter's night. I knew the address, and I knew it wasn't going to be an easy night. There were few roads through forest areas, and even worse was the fact that some of the roads were very narrow. I could barely ride my bike along them. I set off and rode my bike right up to the point where the narrow roads began. Since it was winter, I figured it would be safer if I just parked up my bike and delivered the subscription on foot. There was a footpath after all. There was a postbox at the end of the customer's drive. It was a short distance from the house. I started down the sloped road towards the postbox, and then I froze in my tracks. I heard the sound of a dog barking. No, not just one dog. It sounded like there were at least two. I thought not much of it and approached the postbox with the subscription in hand. It was still pretty much pitch black out, despite it being early morning. As I approached, I noticed a light go on at the front door. There was an old lady stood outside, under the porch. Seeing her gave me a fright. I thought to myself, wow, someone's super eager for the morning paper and this subscription. I figured that since she was out, I could literally put the subscription in her hand, so I approached her. I stopped when she started yelling at me. "Stop right there! What do you think you're doing?" "I'm delivering the newspaper." "And your subscription?" "The boss made us wear a uniform and we have to wear this ID card around our neck, as some customers, especially ones like this, who live in remote areas, can be skeptic of people they don't know. You know, stranger danger and all that." I raised my ID badge, as I assumed she could see me pretty well. "You expect me to believe that? You think that's proof?" She screamed at me. I could see the dogs, especially the whites of their teeth. They bared them at me while they snarled. The old woman then pulled out a pair of long gardening shears or scissors from behind her back and pointed them at me. I instinctively backed away. I just tried to remain as calm as possible. I was wondering if she was suffering with some kind of disease, maybe something like dementia. If she came at me with those long scissors, I planned on pushing them away or trying to kick her in the abdomen. I practiced full contact karate. However, she was an old lady. I don't know if I could have done that to her, and I hoped that it wouldn't come to that. I just said, "Well then, I'll just leave this here and be on my way," and with that I turned to leave. I didn't get paid enough to deal with this rubbish. I upped my pace as the old lady was still shouting at me. She sounded as if she was getting really riled up. The dogs were really barking at me now. I turned to look over my shoulder and I saw her let go of their leashes. She was walking towards me, slashing the air with her scissors. She wasn't making any sense. I couldn't make out a single word that she was shouting at me. And it was time to run now. I raced up the hill as I heard the dogs chasing me. I couldn't believe it. She literally released the hounds on me. I ran up the hill as fast as I could. I needed to get back to my motorbike. I got back to my bike, kicked out the stand and hopped on. I started the engine and had a quick look behind me, and I saw the tips of the dogs' heads coming up the slope, and then I pulled away without looking back again. It was really scary, to be honest. I think myself incredibly lucky to get out of there without any injuries. I mean, it would be a different story if I had a push bike. Those dogs wanted to bite me, I could tell. The old woman looked as if she would have joined in too. I imagined her plunging those large gardening scissors into my gut. I shudder at the thought now. After I delivered all my newspapers and my subscriptions, I spoke with my boss and told him about my close call. He decided that he would make contact with the customer to see what was going on, and I could already imagine him taking the side of the customer. It was just the kind of guy he was. However, he found out that the customer's phone number was no longer in use, so he decided to go out there himself and speak to the customer in person. I told him to watch out for the dogs. He said that he would let me know how it went when I came back to work next. I spoke to him the next day and he told me he went out there to meet the customer, but he found nothing but an abandoned house. He then made contact with the subscription company to find out why someone would want to send a subscription to an empty house. It was at this point we learned that the subscription company had fudged the numbers to make our company take their business. They wanted it to look like they had more customers than they did. They had a quota to fill, so they gave out a couple of addresses of abandoned homes. That's stupid. Who the hell was that woman with the dogs then? I have no idea, but when I think back to it now, how hate-filled her face was, it just gives me the shivers, hence my resignation from the newspaper job. Anyway, I'm working till the end of the month, so I hope I don't get sent anywhere near the scissor woman's house. I only have a couple of days of work left, it'll be fine. Hi, there's a note from me, Jay. There were no other posts by this author. This happened when I went camping with my friend. The weather forecast told us that we were in for some delightful sunny weather, but when we got to the campsite we could already see clouds forming by the evening. Eventually we felt drops of rain and before long we were hiding from some very heavy rainfall. It was honestly terrible. We pitched our tent nearby a river, and the sound that the rain was making was so loud against the roof of the tent that we just had to get out of there and take shelter in a nearby tunnel. The tunnel looked like it was disused, or at least not too busy with traffic, so we thought that we would be fine to take shelter in there for a while. It felt like the trip was a total washout, if you can pardon the pun. I really regretted coming. My friend and I weren't even talking, and usually we are unstoppably loud and chatty girls whenever we get together. But the rain had dampened our spirits. I didn't want to be there, and I know that my friend was probably feeling the same. It was dark out, and thunder was beginning to rumble around us. All of a sudden my friend piped up and said that she could sense somebody nearby. You know that feeling? We looked into the darkness of the tunnel but couldn't see anybody. My friend, she is the type to jump at her own shadow. She has a real nervous streak in her, and she is super sensitive to the slightest noise or disturbance. I tried to calm her down, but she kept saying that she could hear or sense something even though we were clearly the only people in the disused tunnel. She said that she heard voices, footsteps, and all sorts of other things. I was there too, and I could hear no such things. I was irritated that the camping trip turned out to be such a massive failure, and very annoyed that she wouldn't stop going on about hearing and sensing things. I don't like thinking of stuff like ghosts or creepy people out in the woods, so I try my best to avoid conversations like that. I really don't like getting scared. I tried to steer her away from trying to freak me out, but it didn't work. We ended up having a full-on argument out there in the rain. We didn't speak for a while, and this was even worse because there was a whole lot of night left, and now we were in silence. Plus it was getting darker and darker, and my anxiety was building. I kept thinking, what if there is something or someone out here with us? We were stood with our backs to one another, at either side of the tunnel, giving one another the space we needed to cool off. I couldn't take the silence anymore, so I said to my friend, without turning to face her, "I'm cold, aren't you?" And she replied in a very quiet, whisper-like voice, "Yes." I could tell by the lack of strength in her voice that she was likely still riled up and a bit scared. Our relationship kind of worked like this. I was the calm friend whose role it was to make peace and keep everything peaceful. I thought that it was probably time to assume that role. I started talking about other fun trips we had been on, to push away those frightening thoughts that we were both having. I mentioned the time that we went mountain hiking together, and how we both liked the same boy at the same time at high school, and how embarrassing that was. I realized that my anxiety had disappeared, and I even felt a little warmer now. I was really annoyed about the way the rain had ruined this trip for us. We had both been really looking forward to going camping together. I realized that I must have let my frustrations about the situation get the better of me, and I felt sorry about the way I had gotten so annoyed at my friend. So I said, "Sorry about earlier. I really flew off the handle there, and I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have taken it out on you. I was just scared and annoyed by the rain. I said something like that along those lines. I awaited a reply, but it never came. I apologized again, and then again, but I got nothing back. I guessed that she was still mad at me. I turned my thoughts to something else, and I quickly realized something. When we ran for shelter, I don't remember which way we came. Was it left or right? How did we get back to the campsite in pitch black? I hoped that she remembered, or we would have a fun walk in the rain to look forward to. I had to ask her, and she had to reply, annoyed or not. "Hey, there was a fork in the road before the tunnel. Do you remember that? Which way do we go if we want to get back to the campsite? Was it left? Was it right?" I heard a small voice respond, "Left." I thought, whoa, you got a great memory, and I used this opportunity to look over at her. I noticed that she had her headphones on. She was listening to music. I tapped her on the shoulder, and she gave a dissatisfied look as she took off her headphones and said, "What? How did you know that we have to take a left on the way back?" She said that she didn't know what the hell I was talking about. She said that she didn't even hear me ask about how to get back, let alone answer me. I wondered if she was joking, but the more I pushed her for a response, the more she doubled down, stating that she didn't know what I was talking about. Could it be true? When I thought about it, I felt a rush of blood rise to my head. It was terrifying. Someone other than my friend had just responded to my question. Not only that, but they had answered my earlier question about it being cold. Was someone in the tunnel with us? I turned around, slowly, and aimed the flashlight from my phone into the darkness of the tunnel. I couldn't see the end of the tunnel, but I'm pretty confident that there wasn't anyone there. I don't know who that voice belonged to, but whoever it was right. We turned left and we got back to camp. Who the hell was down there with us? It really scared me, and I demanded that we left the camp. There was no way that I'd be able to sleep with someone out here with us in the dark on a night of heavy rain. I read stuff online a lot. Stuff like this. It says, "Hey, oh my god, I saw a ghost in my apartment yesterday. It was horrifying. I took a photo. Check this out. It looks just like an orb, and look at that mist. I don't smoke, so I don't know how to explain that. Some who can sense the presence of ghosts. Some even say that there's a spirit using them as a vessel to write stories online. Sometimes I think to myself, give me a break. But hey, for all you know, a spirit might be using me as a vessel and forcing my hand right now, huh? The world is full of strange phenomena. I don't know if it's all down to the presence of the paranormal, but I want to share with you my experiences in my last apartment, and if nothing else, it might make me feel a little better. So do me a favor and listen, would you? It wasn't a big apartment. The building only had 2 floors. I moved in not long after it had been built, so it wasn't an old place. It all started one winter's afternoon about 2 years ago. I came home from work that night and headed into the bathroom. I noticed something weird. I always leave the bathroom window open, no matter what, winter or summer. It's good to have air circulating. Now this window, it was one of those that you could open outward, like a hopper window. Once that thing was open, it would take some weight to close it. The window faced outwards, but there was a screen shutter over it. So if you wanted to shut my window from the outside, you would need to unscrew the shutter, close the window, then screw the shutter back in. Sounds like it wouldn't be worth it, right? I checked the screws on the shutter. I thought, why not? But I found that there were no signs of tampering. I thought that it was weird, but I just decided to leave it. I opened the window and went on with my night, with the assumption that I closed it and forgot about it. I came home from work on the following night, and to my surprise, I noticed that the bathroom window was closed again. I was sure that it wasn't me being forgetful this time. I literally stood out there and said, I opened you last night. Why are you closed? I was sure, very sure that the window was open when I left for work. I remember looking over at it and thinking about the window being shut the night before. I felt really creeped out all of a sudden. I was very aware that I was alone, but my hair stood on end. Funny what a closed window can do to someone, right? I had dinner in the kitchen, and I couldn't get the window off of my mind. I knew I would have to be in the bathroom later for my bath, and due to some muscle pain, I really wanted to take a bath. I decided after a little while to not allow a window in the bathroom to have so much control over me and my night, so I stormed in there, and I ran myself a bath. There had to be a reasonable, logical answer, I thought to myself. I just couldn't find it yet. This is unusual for apartments in my price range, but my bathroom was pretty big. It was nice. When I got ready for a bath, I noticed something in the corner of my eye. Something dark, up high. I looked up and noticed that there was a hole in the ceiling. No, to be more precise, it was as if a panel in the bathroom ceiling had been opened and left ajar. It was like a lid or some kind of hatch. I didn't really pay attention to it before. The hole inside was pitch black and about 50 centimeters in diameter. I decided to close the lid of that panel and skip taking a bath that night. I wondered how long that hatch had been open for, and if it was open yesterday. I couldn't get it off my mind, and I had a really rough night of sleep. I decided to get up and take a flashlight into the bathroom and look into the bathroom attic panel hatch thing. I dragged a chair in from the lounge and stood on it. I was really glad to see that the hatch wasn't open when I went back in the bathroom. I stood there considering things, trying to motivate myself to open the panel, and after a brief moment I took the plunge and opened it. I illuminated the hole with my flashlight. I looked up there and there was nothing really there. In fact, I wasn't even sure why my bathroom needed this weird little ceiling space. I saw the metal divider that blocks the attic space into the next apartment, but nothing else. It was like a secret little space, but what was the purpose of the space? It wasn't the last time this happened. It was so weird. Whenever the window is shut, the little hatch in the attic/bathroom opens. I really hate it. It scares the hell out of me, and I have no idea what is causing it or what it means. It really creeps me out every time I see that hatch open and the window shut. It's like there's something in my apartment. I would have superglued it shut, but I was renting. I didn't want to tell the landlord because he would have thought that I was insane. I mean, all that's happened is a panel opening and a window closing. It's hardly anything frightening, right? Well, that is what I thought until some other strange happenings occurred in my apartment. One night, a friend of mine was over, and we were up late having a good time. Eventually, we said our goodnights, and he was on his way. As I was sat at my desk, I heard a loud sneeze that was definitely a male sneeze. I didn't hear it coming from outside of the apartment. It sounded like it came from inside. I was certain that it didn't come from the guy next door as well. Moments after the sneeze, I felt this strange feeling. It felt as if I was drowning or being smothered. It was all cold and strange, but somehow, to me, it suddenly felt funny. So my fear for the situation I was in quickly went away. It was really weird. That's when I was convinced that something was going on that I didn't know anything about. I lived in that apartment while I was at college, and I felt as if there was an earthquake occurring every single day. I was convinced, but apparently I was the only person in my class who could feel the tremors. I would ask anyone I knew on campus questions like, "We've been having a lot of earthquakes recently, haven't we?" And people didn't know what the hell I was talking about. It made me really paranoid. Once I had a friend around to my apartment, and I felt the ground shaking, and I said to my friend, now you know what I'm talking about. Did you feel that? And he replied, "No, not really." I was shocked. I told myself maybe he didn't notice it because it was a very small tremor, but I knew that I felt it, so it felt like a flimsy excuse. The quakes continued for about a year. They drove me insane and made me feel so paranoid. Was it that I was the only one experiencing them, or was I the only one who was talking about them? I met a fresher one afternoon, and we spoke for a while. We instantly hit it off, and I felt comfortable mentioning the issues that I had been having with the quakes. She went quiet and looked at me and said, "It's happening to me too." She said that she felt the quakes every day. She lived alone, and her apartment was a little ways away from mine. Our lifestyles were pretty similar, actually. We were very similar in a lot of ways. One thing that we did note about our homes was about halfway between them, there was a JMSDF, the Japanese Military Self-Defense Force. They had a base there, about halfway between our houses, and we joked to one another that they might be conducting secret military experiments underground. Now, we never got to the bottom of it, but sometimes I wonder if that little joke of ours had a tiny bit of truth to it. I hope the things which happened to us weren't some secret experiments. But it makes me a little more scared of that hatch when I consider the possibilities. This happened way back when I was in the 3rd grade. I say way back, but that was only about 10 years ago. Well, I'm 19 now, so whatever. Anyway, I used to live in the countryside. I used to spend hours playing out in the woods and the mountains. I had 3 close friends who I used to play with. We had been a tight-knit crew since the 1st grade. We stayed out as late as we could almost every night, even during winter. We would all go home before darkness fell. We didn't stay out after the sun went down. That was kind of a rule. Over the years, I had become familiar with my surroundings. We played out in the woods so much that I could have drawn you a map of the area at that age. So one day we are all out in the woods playing and one of my friends runs off. It was nothing unusual though. Since we all knew where we were and we weren't that far from home, we didn't really bat an eyelid if someone just sort of wandered off. We just figured he would be back in a matter of minutes. We used to play hide and seek, so we knew all the hiding places. There was loads of places to go. This time it was a little different though. He didn't come back in what we would have deemed at that age as a normal period of time. My 2 other friends didn't seem that worried. I said I would be heading off shortly, so I told them that I would look out for him on the way home. I found my friend about 500 meters away from the usual spot we hung out in. He was staring at something intently. I called out to him something along the lines of, "What are you looking at, man?" As I drew closer, I realized that he was looking at a well. "Why the hell is there a well here?" he asked me. I looked at the well. It was covered with a wooden kind of lid. There was a bucket hanging from the wooden structure above the lid. I was a little weirded out to see a well in the woods, but my initial fear and hesitation soon turned to curiosity, as it does for most young boys of that age. The sense of an adventure, or the unraveling of a mystery, had too much sway. I needed to know what was down there, so I went about trying to open the lid. The lid came off easily enough with the help of my friend, and it revealed a well, which had the diameter of about a meter. I could see the bottom, so I was confident that it wasn't that deep. One of my friends said that he had a flashlight at home. and he would run off and get it. In the meantime, me and my other friends spoke about which one of us should go down there. I wanted to, and I was the smallest, so I won that argument. I used the rope, as well as my feet, on the walls of the well to shimmy my way down. It wasn't long before I realized that the well was much deeper than I had first anticipated. I felt so small in comparison to the drop below. As I shimmied down, I was able to get to a point where I could see the bottom of the well, and that did reassure me a little. I aimed the flashlight at the bottom of the well. As my friends' voices echoed from above, they were asking me what I could see. The bottom of the well was covered in dead leaves, and they looked as if they had been down there for a long time. They were black, and none of them were dry or fresh. They asked me to shine the flashlight all over the bottom of the well. The moment I answered their question, I felt as if the well suddenly got darker. I looked upwards to the mouth of the well. I climbed down to see nothing but blackness. I realized quickly that my friends had put the cover back over the top of the well. I was entombed in the pitch black well. For a couple of seconds, I didn't realize that my friends had done what they had done. I had a burst of pure confusion, but once the fog of confusion had dissipated, I realized what they had done, and I called out to them immediately. "Come on, guys, don't be stupid, open it, please." I shouted until I was hoarse in the throat, but my friends didn't answer me. It began to frighten me. Things got worse when the flashlight that my friend had given me began to flicker and dim. I swear to God, it was like something out of a horror movie. I felt salty tears sting the corners of my eyes when I realized that I was alone in there. Can you imagine the terror of being trapped in there, trying your best to keep your knees from shaking, your palms from sweating, knowing that one wrong move or slip drops you to the bottom of the well? Finally, the flashlight ran out, and there was nothing but me, the well, and darkness. It felt all that more narrow and claustrophobic in the dark. I kept screaming. It was all I could do. The sound of my own screams began to drive me a little crazy, though. Then the flashlight, which I thought was out, suddenly jolted back to life. Or light again. I was instantly relieved. I wanted to get better handholds and footholds, and now I had the chance. I figured that I might as well head to the bottom and conserve my strength until my 3 jerk so-called friends came back. I still had hoped that it was just a prank at this point. It dawned on me that if I just kept quiet, then maybe my friends would be satisfied that they had scared me enough or even start to worry about me. I sat at the bottom of the well with the flashlight pointing in front of me, and that's when I noticed something. When I looked up, I noticed that there was a handle of some description jutting out from the stone wall of the well. I decided to climb back up to see what was there. I pulled on the handle of this door, and with a pop it fell open. Wow, now this was an adventure. This was what I was looking for. I felt a little like a ninja. The excitement was back, and my friends would hear all about this discovery as soon as I got out. I maneuvered myself into a position where I was able to aim my flashlight into the open doorway. As soon as my torchlight fell upon the contents of that hidden area behind the door, my blood ran cold. Dolls and mannequins littered the hollowed-out space. They were of various sizes and shapes. They were all propped up to face the entrance of the secret door. I was stunned by the absurdity of it all. There was something big inside that cavernous space. A huge mannequin was lying there. It had scratches all over its legs. Its clothing was in tatters, and there were dark handprints all over it. I moved the flashlight up to the mannequin's face, and I saw that its eyes had been gouged out. It was at this point that I lost grip of the rope and slipped to the bottom of the well. That's pretty much all I can remember from that day. I woke up at one of my friend's houses. As soon as I saw my friend, I lashed out at him. I shouted at him, hit him, and kicked him. I was so angry that they left me trapped in that well. I was pulled away from my friend by his dad. Everyone was crying and apologizing to me. I really didn't understand what was happening. They told me what happened when I climbed into the well. They had initially hoped to frighten me for a second or two when they closed the lid. A lid, by the way, that took only 2 of us to lift up in the first place. However, this time when they tried to lift the lid, they were unable to do so, and they started to panic. One of my friends ran off to get his dad while 2 of the others stayed at the well, desperately trying to lift the lid. They said that they heard my muffled screams but couldn't do anything for me, and it made them feel terrible. By the time that I had stopped screaming and shouting, they had just about used up their energy in trying to open the lid. We must have all simultaneously slumped to the floor at the same time. Meanwhile, my friend and his dad were racing back with some tools to open the well. His dad brought a hammer, and he smashed through the lid of the well. His dad found me at the bottom of the well with some dolls around me. He pulled me up out of the well with the help of some of the other local adults, and I remember sleeping pretty much the whole next day after I left my friend's house. My parents were really worried about me. I wasn't hurt though, which I found weird. There wasn't a scratch on me. Lucky, I guess. Our parents got together and lobbied to get the well filled in. They even had a priest come out to bless the well. The police even got involved. There were rumors about missing people and things in there being like souvenirs or something. I'm certain that I saw a mannequin in that dark cavernous space in the well. I'm certain that it wasn't human. Am I certain of that? Well, I couldn't tell you these days, but back then I was certain. Maybe? Yeah, maybe it was a mannequin. Maybe not. Anyways, the well was filled in, but to this day, I still get the cold sweats whenever I see a mannequin, or dolls all clustered up together. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a mannequin. Warning, this story features some grotesque depictions. This happened about 8 years ago, back when I was living in Yokohama. I had a job on Nihon Odori, but I was living in a bad neighborhood. I lived in a really run-down apartment near Bandobashi. I didn't hate it there because I wasn't exactly fond of a simple life. You know, public order or societal rules. If you went out at night in my area, you would likely see tons of weirdos. It's a predator and prey situation. Half of the creeps out there are looking to make some cash from whatever method they think is possible, and the other half are the creeps they prey upon. Yeah, I saw all kinds of strange things while I was living out there. I'll give you a couple quick examples. There was this old dude who was always drunk and lying in the road no matter what time of day or night it was. Another one was this woman, who when she was shopping in the local supermarket, she would say everything she was doing out loud. There were many more examples, but none more memorable than what happened when I headed home late one night. I had a motorbike and I used it to drive to a nearby parking lot. There I would cut the ignition and then push it through a narrow alleyway back to my building. Using this shortcut was really great because it saved me a lot of time, hassle, and gas. The only problem was the fact that a lot of bums and drunks used that alley to either drink, piss, or pass out. I tried not to use the shortcut all the time. I mean, it was a really dark and narrow place. It wasn't great, but it was fine. Anyways, I was working late that night. I didn't think I'd ever leave the office until about 1 a.m. It's crazy, right? But it happens in Japan more often than you might think. The seniors at our company stayed even later than us, putting together the paperwork for a new contract. But when they said, "You young people can go home," me and a few others jumped at the chance. Since I left for home later than I wanted, I decided to use my alley shortcut. I just wanted to go to sleep. I couldn't even be bothered to push my bike back to my building. I just left it right there in the parking lot. I entered the alley, and I saw a black mass in the alley, some kind of shape. It made me stop dead in my tracks. It was just visible due to the far-reaching streetlight. It looked like a large garbage bag at a distance. As I drew closer to the black mass in the alley, I wondered what it was, but then I heard a weird noise. It sounded like a squelching kind of noise, like someone wading through mud. I realized that the squelching noise seemed to react to my movement. Each time I took a step forward, I heard it subtly. Perhaps that was a coincidence, though, because with each step I realized something else too. The black mass before me in the alley wasn't a garbage bag. It was a human. No, not just one human, but two. One of the human shapes seemed to be lying down with its feet facing my way. The other humanoid shape, it seemed to be on top of the first shape, with its back facing towards me. This humanoid shape was wearing black, and it looked like it was doing something. Well, this shocked me. I couldn't believe people would want to, get down in Bum Alley. It was gross, creepy, and just plain weird, but the fundamental feeling I felt at the time was one of pure exhaustion, so I was like, whatever, I'm going home. Another point, I was so used to this alley and my area, I guessed that seeing what I saw wasn't all that disturbing or shocking. I was kind of desensitized at that point. I didn't know what to do though, so I just stood there for a while, trying to remain silent, trying to figure out whether or not to try and pass them by or turn back. I was about 2 or 3 meters away from them in the alley, and then disaster struck. My company's cell phone began to ring. It gave me such a fright. I never have my phone on the highest volumes, but at that time of night, in the quiet of the alley, it sounded like the loudest thing in the world. It turns out that I wasn't the only one surprised by the sound of my ringtone, because the person who was on top of the other person spun around to face me, and I got a look at him. He was a middle-aged man by the look of it. He was wearing spectacles and a dark coat with the hood up. He looked a little chubby too. The most notable thing about that guy was what he was holding. He held a hatchet-looking bladed weapon in one hand. I got a look at his face. There was just enough streetlight to make it out that night. He had a dark stain all over his mouth. I saw white puffs of breath coming out of his mouth with each exhalation he took. He panted like a dog. His round, little spectacles looked all fogged up too. They were pure white. While he was turned in my direction, I could see more of the person he was on top of. There was a whitish-looking object. It kind of looked like a hand. The person underneath the man with the glasses looked to be pinned down, lying on their front. The yellowish end of that hand-like object was facing me, and I instantly recognized what it was. It looked like it was some kind of bloody stump. I then realized what that dark stain around the guy with the glasses' mouth was, as well as the sound. That terrible squelching sound that I had heard earlier. It was likely the sound of the man in the glasses eating. The guy he was on top of looked smaller than him. Perhaps he was one of the bums or the drunks I'd ran into in the alley before. I was frozen in place for a little while, but as soon as my brain got out of first gear, I turned on my heels, and I got the hell out of that alley. I remember wanting to scream, but I just couldn't. I heard him kind of grunt, and then I heard an object get flung in my direction. It collided with one of the walls in the alley, and it sounded metallic. I'm guessing that it was his weapon. My heart was racing. When you're so scared like that, deep down in the bottom of your heart, you'll find that you can't even breathe. From behind me, I heard the shout of that man. It didn't sound natural. It sounded like some kind of inhuman guttural growl. I'm not saying the guy wasn't a human, because he was. I'm just saying that whatever noise came out of that man came from a very disturbed place. I ran straight into the local convenience store to be in the safety of the light. I hung out there for a while until I was certain that the man hadn't followed me, and as soon as I was sure I was safe, I literally broke down in the men's room while I was sobbing and freaking out. I think I must have attracted the attention of the store worker and maybe any customers who were out as late as I was. Just then, as I was about to compose myself, my cell phone rang again. One of the seniors at my company had been trying to get in touch. I can't remember exactly what he wanted, but it was something like he needed access to a shared file, which was password protected or something, or he didn't know where something was saved. He noted that I sounded upset, and he showed something similar to concern towards me, which felt so entirely alien, it was almost as frightening as what I saw in the alley. I didn't know how I could answer him with the truth, so I just lied and said that everything was fine, and I hung up. I felt that at least speaking to someone had a calming effect, so I decided to go to the nearest police station to make a report. However, there was no one at the front desk. There was a number to call if the desk was unattended, and I called it, but no one picked up. I was afraid to go home that night. I didn't want to be in the same area as what I saw. I took a taxi to the next town over and spent the night in a 24-hour cafe in Sakuragicho, and then I headed home in the morning. As soon as the sun came up, I phoned in sick for work, and I spent most of the day looking for a new place to live. I haven't been anywhere near that alley since. I have no idea what happened that night, but I keep checking news sources for any kind of cannibalistic reports. I know what I saw. I just hope that man still isn't out there.